All right. Starting the stream. Testing it out. Just making sure we're good to go. All right. It says the internet can totally see you now. Stream. Testing it out. Okay, awesome. So, welcome to LambdaSchool Mini Bootcamp Lesson 6 for full stack Python development. Today we're going to go over some CSS stuff and Flexbox and layouts, the box model, some different things like that to get you on your way to creating some cool designs. Yeah, real quick, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Ben Nelson. I will be the lead instructor for the upcoming camps that will be starting in April. Yeah, I'm a full stack software engineer. I do everything from CSS, HTML, JavaScript, React Redux on the client, to JavaScript, Node, Express, Mongo on the back end. And so we're going to be teaching a lot of that in our course. We're going to be teaching, again, React Redux on the client. We'll be teaching testing, automated testing. We're going to be going through like a test-driven workflow. So on a typical day, you'll get a project, and there will be all these automated tests that we've coded for you. And so you're going to write some code to satisfy those tests and get them to pass. And yeah, and this is going to help you learn a bunch of different topics. And so everything from client-side coding to back-end security, how to salt, hash, and encrypt passwords. Touching on some machine learning concepts with neural networks, touching on mobile development using React Native for iOS and Android. And also we want to really emphasize that we're going to be doing a lot of career support. Helping you write a resume, helping you apply to jobs, helping you do these different things that will position you and help you to be able to go out and apply the skills that you've learned during our class. And this support will be ongoing. So in the future, at any point, if you need any help, if you need us to come back and help you negotiate a salary or help you rework your resume or work on your interview skills, then we'll come in and help you out on that. So yeah, our seats are filling up fast, and so anyway. Hurry up and apply. We only have a few spots left. But yeah, it'll be great. We're looking forward to it. Okay, so let's dive in. And I'll do a screen share now. Right. Display caption. Great. Okay. All right, so we're going to jump over to this website called JSBin, and it's a cool little playground to just kind of play around with like HTML, CSS, JavaScript interaction. It's just a nice little way to kind of test out basic code without having to set up an entire environment, and it's pretty cool. You can just drag in all sorts of different tools that you need. Another one that's really popular is JS Fiddle. So JSBin, JS Fiddle, they're both really good. I like this one because I get a little more space to code because it's just these big columns that I can open and close. So on the left we have the HTML. In the center I have the CSS column, and then on the right is the output. So the output, that's going to show us the rendered HTML and CSS. So something we're going to go over is, let me pull up my little sticky note just to make sure. Okay. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a div. All right. So a div is it's kind of one of the major building blocks that you use when you're building out layouts or just big like sections on your page. And a div, by default, when you create another one of them, it will automatically go onto a new line. So they don't sit next to each other. They sit right below each other. That'll make more sense in just a moment when we can actually see it. So all right, so we need to be able to, target our elements and apply styles to them. So I can type in the name of the HTML element right here. So I can type in just the word div, and then I can go background, and that's the background color. You can call it background, or you can call it background color, either way. And let's give it red. Okay, so we've just given it the color of red, but where is it? We can't see it. So the problem is that a div by default does not have a height, and so it's flat. So it's 0 by 100, 100% of the width, and so there's anyway, so there's nothing there that renders. So you have to give it a height property, otherwise you're not going to see anything. And so right here, this style, we're saying give a background color of red to every div, and then also give a height of 50 pixels to every div. And so if we put another div, then we see now that they're right next to each other. And so like there's absolutely no space in between them. So it's 100 pixels of red. And and if we put in another one, then we have 3. And so you can see that it just gets bigger and bigger. And so okay, and if we wanted to apply specific styles to one of the divs and not the others, then that's when classes and IDs come in. So the first thing that we're going to talk about with the box model, and what the box model is, I'll pull up a representation of it real quick. The box model, CSS, and W3 Schools has a little graphic for it. So right here you can see this rectangle. And on the rectangle there's the margin, there's the border, there's padding, and then there's content. And this is what every single HTML element is made of. And so these are the 4 different things that affect the size and the spacing of an element. And so so the margin is the space between the element and any neighboring elements. The border is just like you'd expect. It's just a border around the edge of the box. The padding, that's the distance between the border and then the stuff that's inside the box, so like text. So if you had text inside of the box, or like if you imagine like a button, there's text on the center of the button. So like kind of up here, if you look at this angular button, there's the text that says angular, but then there's space between the letters and then the edges of the square, or edges of the rectangle. And that space is called the padding. That's the distance between the text, which is the content, and then the border. And right now there is no border. The border's nothing, and then the margin is also nothing because this box butts up right next to this box, so there's no distance. So yeah, margin, border, padding, and content. So we'll kind of play around with some of these in here. So let's go if we give I never told anyone I was starting. Uh-oh. Let's see. Let me just fix this out real quick. All right. Well, I'll just keep going, I guess, for the recording. I just assumed that it was 6:30. Oh, all right. Well, sorry, everyone. I just assumed that 6:30 that we'd just be starting right then. But let me backtrack a little bit. It sounds like some people missed some stuff. So let me jump back a little bit. Okay. So, all right. We have our, let's see. Let me ask Austin. All right. Okay. All right, everyone. Well, I started at 6:30, but I will jump right back to the beginning. And then if you're watching a recording of this later on, then probably skip over the next couple minutes. Yeah, so it works for the recording. People can rewind the live recording, right? All right, I'm just gonna keep going. All right, Okay, so I'm pretty sure you can just rewind back. If not, you can jump back and rewatch the video at another when it's later and when we publish it. So, all right, so margin. So let's add some margin to these elements. So if I add a margin bottom, what that's doing is we're saying to each div, we're going to add 5 pixels of space between you and the next element. And so right along here we have this this gray bar, and then down here we have another gray bar. Yeah, it just punches out some little space. We could also have done margin top, and that would have accomplished the same thing here. It just sort of made this top div have a little space between itself and the top of the container. Yeah, so you can specify margin top, or we can specify margin bottom. Yeah, so margin includes that. Nope, hotkeys, I'm not used to the hotkeys in here. So here's what we'll do. On this top one, I'm going to put a paragraph tag in it. So a paragraph tag is where you put some text. So I'm going to put hello world in it. Okay. And so now I'm going to change the background color of the hello world paragraph. That way we can just see exactly where the where that element is inside of the box. So let's do background, and we'll go blue. Okay. So we see that the paragraph tag, it's taking up, again, 100% of the width. It's sitting at the top of the div, and the contrast is pretty bad. So let me, okay, so we'll set the color to white there. So we got some red, white, and blue. So the color, again, background sets the background color. Color, just the word color, sets the text color of that element. So, all right, so we're starting, okay, so we're getting this paragraph. So now we have this paragraph tag inside of the div. So it's by nesting an element inside of another element, it puts it on top of it. So the paragraph is on top of the div, like stacks it on top. So with this hello world being on top, let's say we want to move it around now within the context of div. We want to position it so like maybe it's a couple pixels from the top. And so this is when padding comes in. And so what we can do now is we can go padding top, we'll go 5 pixels. Okay, all right. And so anyway, what this is doing is now this is it's going to add some space in our element. And if we go in and inspect it, then we can actually look at the different values in it. So and you can live edit them in here as well. So like I said, if I wanted to adjust the padding, I can turn it down like this, or I can, you can even go negative with some of them. I can make it really big, and you can see how the elements adjust in real time. And so this is a really good way to kind of play around with the values before, because initially it can be a little difficult to mentally understand exactly what values you need to put. And so playing around inside of the inspector like this can really can help you get a better idea. But obviously none of these values save. This page is going to, as soon as I make a change in here, it's going to read the CSS file and apply it again. And so any changes I've made down here in the inspector will be off. But down on the bottom, we have our box model. And so the box model, it tells us on the element that we've highlighted, it tells us how much padding there is. And as we hover over it, it highlights it. And so we see there's some padding. And yeah, you can see it kind of change colors up on the top of the screen. So the padding, and then there's the content, which we hover over, and yeah. And so that is kind of what that looks like. And so you can see the margin too, because we put a margin bottom on there. And so it tells you, yeah, where the margin is on each side of the element. It tells you the content dimensions, the padding dimensions for all the different sides, the border. Yeah. All right, so let's go in and let's add a border here. I think it's 1 pix solid yellow. Let's do this. I can't really see any of them. Black. Okay. 10 pix. Okay, that's a huge one. All right, let's go 3 pixels. Okay. So Again, yeah, there's the border, and obviously this looks super ugly, but these are the general principles, and then by tweaking them, you can make them to these are the basic tools that you can use to build anything that you want, anything that you can imagine. All right, so there's the border, and now if we let's come in and look at this paragraph tag. So the paragraph, we come here and we see the border, and so it applies 3 pixels on each side. It's solid. This can be changed to like, I think dashed is another word. Yep. And dotted. Yep. Okay. So these are just, and knowing these, you just have to look up the references. And so when you're trying to change some of this stuff, like the point of this lecture is more to get you familiar with what tools exist, what nouns you need to Google in order to get the boxes to look how you want them to look later on. And so this W3 schools, they have a pretty straightforward reference with a lot of this HTML and CSS stuff. Generally, they show up at the top of your Google searches, and it's usually pretty straightforward. And so that's where you can like find the reference, like with border. You can also, like with border, you can also set it to like specifically say like border border bottom. And let's get rid of this. Well, yeah, actually, I don't know. I'd have to look it up. But anyway, you can play around, and there's different ways that you can affect the border. You can affect the margin. You can affect the padding. So like, let's say we wanted Hello World to be off the left side a little bit. We can add a padding left of 15 pixels, and that brings it over a little bit. So make it 15, bring it in quite a bit. 115, let's bring in even more. Yeah, so that's anyway, that's what the padding is doing on the paragraph. The paragraph is this blue box, and then Hello World is the content. A few other things relating to text. We have line height. And so line height can affect, it affects the size of the content. That's how you affect the content height. We can also go, so let's say I'll get rid of some of this padding. We can go text align center. So that pops the text in the center. So in that case, let's say maybe we want to get rid of the padding after that. And so now Hello World is centered up in the top of our element. Yeah, and then you can change font size. You can, I mean, kind of think back to like when you were maybe younger and like playing around on like your like Microsoft Word or something like that, and you're trying to like format your text and do all that. A lot of those same properties that are all here within CSS. Yeah, so like font sizes, margins, things like that. Those same like typography principles, a lot of them were all brought over into HTML and CSS, because when websites were first created, if you think to like Wikipedia, so if you think like Wikipedia, like samurai. All right, so this like initially this is what a lot of web pages really just looked like. It was just text. They had hyperlinks. Those are some of the basic things. Like you change some of the borders and some of the colors, but everything was, meant to be just very, very, simple, plain, kind of straightforward. And a lot of it was kind of, modeled after newspapers a little bit. And so a lot of the terminology comes from like newspaper layouts and those typography principles. But then now it's people have then taken that and mutated it and changed it, and now we've made these really cool user interface, graphical user interfaces and things using those HTML, CSS properties. And anyway, yeah, it's really expanded beyond what it was originally envisioned to be. Okay, so all right, so we got the box model. Now let me jump in and all right. Width, height, pixel percentage. Okay, all right. So now let's look at, let's see. Well, real quick, let's see if anyone has any questions. If you have any questions, shout them out to me, tag me in it. Do like Sunjiaming in the questions channel, and then I'll go through it. So, all right. Yep, yeah, jump back in the recording. I'm going to update these notes real quick. There's something I forgot to enter in. All right, and then, okay. All right, well, shout out the questions and do like an @Sunjiaming at any time, and it'll pop up in the corner of my screen, and I'll see it, and I'll take a moment to answer it. Okay, so now I'm going to teach you about a thing called a pseudo-class. So, or a pseudo-selector, I guess is probably a better way to call it. Okay, so I'm going to put an ID on this second block. And okay, question popped up. I'll get to that in just a second. And then I'm just going to call this, well, okay. It's better practice to use a class. Honestly, 99% of the time you're going to be using classes. An ID should only be used once on a page. And IDs are tricky because if you're using them everywhere, it's harder to establish or to overwrite like an ID. Whereas if you have classes, you can use specificity to override other styles that are on an element, like when there's conflicts. Anyway, don't worry about that too much. Just the main idea is only use an ID once on a page. You should mainly be using classes. So I'm going to call this all right, hovering. Okay, let's see. Detect hover. Okay. So now let's come in here, and I'm going to go detect hover. Okay. So a class is a class trumps just a generic element CSS like selector. So like a P or a div, a class trumps it, and then an ID trumps a class. And so in here I can say background, and then I'll go green. And so you can see here that this middle element turns green. And that one, yeah, it's because the class overrides the default style. And so what will often happen in your application is they'll have kind of these base default styles that get applied to everything, and then you build more specific classes and things on top of them that override the ones below it to give you more unique styles for different parts of your page. And so like you'll often have, I mean, there could be 10 different classes on an element, and they're all applying slightly different things to it to modify its behavior. So, all right, so the detect cover, and then we have background green. So then now what we're going to do is I'm going to copy this, and then I can go :hover. And then what this is going to do is it's going to detect that when the mouse is hovering over this element, then it's going to change the background color. And so you can see that as soon as the mouse enters over the element, then it turns yellow, and then when I leave, it goes off. So as soon as this element is giving off that event of having a mouse hover over it, then it's going to render and change this color. And so if I jump back over to W3 Schools, that's most likely what's happening here. When I hover over these elements and it's applying that color, that's most likely what's happening. Whenever you can, you want to do things with CSS. So if like the hover of a button, like when you're hovering over a button and you want the color to change, you would rather do that with CSS than with JavaScript, because that speeds up your application. That generally just when you're interacting with the DOM and changing things like that with JS, if you have lots of those things going on, that can kind of slow down your application. And so, but CSS is usually very, very quick. It's also very clean and keeps that type of behavior. Logic, like just mentally, you have it organized in with your CSS classes instead of having to have all of this, JavaScript code to accomplish the same thing. So, all right, so I'm going to go in and answer that question now. Okay, if you only have a little CSS to use, would you put it in the index.html file instead? Yeah, I would always factor it out into another CSS file. Yeah, just generally, yeah, it keeps it clean, just kind of like what Austin said. And then one of the main ideas is just if you can keep your CSS out of your HTML, then best practice. I mean, if you're just like dinking around and like and it's not like a major project, like, I mean, no big deal. But anyway, if you're doing anything in production, anything serious, anything with like scale to it, like, it's going to get big, yeah, definitely you want to factor it out into another CSS file. All right, so gone over hover. Okay, so now I'm going to go over just one other thing with this this third element. So whenever you see these buttons on the top of a screen, like you have a bunch of buttons right next to each other, kind of like up here. Let's do an inspect element on it. I don't know, watch it. This one probably won't be like that. But so if you notice, this is very common practice that when you have a set of like a nav bar with a bunch of different buttons, you use an unordered list. And you can see right here we have this unordered list, and then these are all the list items. And so you can see as I hover over them, they get highlighted in blue up above. And so it's kind of a creative use, but that's actually how most sites do it. Is you have this unordered list, and then you make the elements sit next to each other, and then the LIs represent the different buttons. So we're gonna play around with that a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to stick an unordered list here inside of this this bottom div. I'm going to give this div a class of footer, and so we're going to pretend this is like the footer in your application, and you're setting up a bunch of buttons down on the bottom. All right, so then let's. So I'm going to set footer, this class, and then let's set background gray. Okay, so set a gray background to it. I use these default colors just for convenience, but I mean, if you're ever building an application, like chances are you're not using the default yellow or the default green or whatever. You're going to be using hex codes or RGB or RGBA values. Okay, so now let's do. All right, so we'll add these three LIs. You can see these dots popping over there because that's the default LI. All right, so then now on the UL we're going to add another class. All right, so let's call this we'll call this social media icons. So on the bottom of websites, you often see they'll have all these little social media icons that they're positioned next to each other, so you can go and view their Twitter page or Instagram or whatever. So we'll reference that down here. All right, I don't have anything I'm going to add in there right this moment. And then down here on these LIs, I'm going to do, the class is going to be, I'll just call this icon. Actually, I'm going to get that space there too. So copy that. Okay. So now the class is nice because then I can apply that icon class to all three of those elements, apply styling, and it's going to be copied across all three. So now let's come down here and then do the icon element. And I'm gonna get rid of the inspector for right now, just to give us some more space. So, okay. So now, first thing I like to set a background on elements. Even when I'm developing, like when I'm developing an application, I like to set the background to these big, bright, garish colors. And the reason I do that is it helps me see exactly where the element is, and so that way I don't like forget, like, oh, it's taking up the full width of the page. I thought it was only taking up half of it. Or it just helps me position it exactly, and then I'll go back in and remove that background color when it's ready to deploy. Yeah, let me check this question real quick. Is there a way to see their CSS file in the Chrome inspect? Yeah. So if so let's go back to W3. Let's dig around in here. Well, let's go to Wikipedia. They might have some more like their code is probably more simple. So if you go to sources, you see this thing here. It says like n.wikipedia.org. So like English Wikipedia.org is their domain. And then if we go down to static and images, it's probably in here. Oh, okay, so it's not in there. All right, so I think, so what we can do, usually it's over in there, but we can, when you do an inspect element, you can go over here and it says, it gives you a URL, and if you click on that, okay, they're doing something weird with their CSS. Let me jump over into, let me try a different website. This one might do a better job. Okay, so, all right, okay, so code mirror CSS. All right, so I click on that and I jump over and here's one of their CSS pages. And so yeah, you can actually see it. And yeah, so you can copy like a lot of their styles and stuff like that. So if you're curious how someone did something and want to, like, you know, you think something cool, you can jump in and see it all. Because all the CSS, it all comes down to your browser, all the HTML does. Sometimes they scramble it. Sometimes they scramble it to make it harder to copy the code. They call it obfuscating. And then like, within it also, but mainly yeah, because you can also, you can minify it in the sense that like, okay, let me back up. All right, so to speed up application load, they'll do things to like your HTML and CSS and JavaScript files to make it so that way they can get loaded down to your browser faster. And so they'll do things like take out all the spaces, they collapse everything down, they minify it. They can do things where they swap out all the variable names for like something that's shorter. So like it'll go through and it'll find like all your classes or whatever, and then it will change them to like a single letter, and then, you know, it'll have like a system like that to kind of reduce things, and it'll do that with JavaScript as well. But so sometimes it's like trickier than others to view like the page's source code, but pretty often it's you can come in and just see it like this, where it's like border right, you know, they're setting all this in background color and white space, and yeah. All right, let me, okay, is Flexbox same as the CSS box? So you know what, actually, to be honest, I actually don't know what CSS box is. I know, like, unless you're referring to like the box model, that might be what you're referring to. Yeah, okay, so I'm actually gonna go over Flexbox in just a minute. So the Flexbox is a way of doing layouts. I'm actually going to touch on that in just a moment when I align some of these icons. And then I'm going to nuke all this stuff and then build another little page for you guys. And then, anyway, that's about the course of that. That's the direction I'm going with this stuff I'm going over right now. All right, so I'm going to do background yellow. Okay, so that's kind of just giant blocks. They're all butted up against each other. So now let's do height, let's go 50 pixels, width 50 pixels, and then let's go border radius 50%. That's just kind of something you just remember. Border radius 50% turns a square into a circle. That's just something you remember. I'm going to change these to 25 pixels, make them a little smaller. Okay. All right, so now we have these yellow circles. They're overflowing off of the gray, and then they have these bullet points next to them. So I actually need to look it up. I forgot the exact wording for it, but Google's your best friend because it's hard to memorize every little attribute with CSS and JavaScript and everything. There's just a ton of information there, and so there's a lot of good references. And if you just as you get better at being able to search and quickly find the information, then there's less you have to remember. So I know that there's probably a million people that have Googled this before, just because most people don't want dots next to their unordered list. And so what you could do is ul remove dots, and then that's probably gonna bring it up pretty quick. So unordered list without any bullets. Okay, so I'll click on that on Stack Overflow. So then I come down here, list style type to none. Okay. All right, I think there's another way to do it too, but I feel like list style, I think. Yeah, list style is what I found earlier. Okay. All right, so list style none. Great. So that gets rid of our black dots. Okay, so now we need these to all sit next to each other. So layouts and positioning within CSS can be kind of tricky. I'm going to teach you guys a thing called Flexbox. It makes layouts and stuff really simple. It's awesome. The only drawback to it is its browser support. So it's not 100% supported in IE 11, so sometimes it can be a little bit buggy, and that's pretty recent. But Internet Explorer Edge, it's supported on that, and it's been supported on every other major browser for a while. So with Internet Explorer, and if you're going back many iterations of Internet Explorer, then you're gonna your layouts and stuff could be kind of wonky. But anyway, for the sake of learning, I think this is the easiest way to get a layout down right now. So, all right. So this URL is in your homework, but it's csstricks.com/snippet/css, a guide to Flexbox. And this is you just have this open as a reference. I have this open whenever I'm doing layouts and just come back in and jump in and make sure that I have the exact wording right. But yeah, this is also when you get into, we'll teach this later, but when we get into like React Native and doing iOS development and Android development, this is how they do all their layouts. So it uses Flexbox. And anyway, this, in my opinion, I think this is the future of doing layouts in the browser. So, all right, so what we have to do, the first thing we need to do is on the container, we need to set it to display flex. So I'm going to jump back over. And social media icons, that's the container. And so we'll go display flex. Okay, and that by default, that just sits them all right next to each other. Okay, so now I'm going to jump back over to the guide. All right, so explains flex direction. You can change that up. That's the kind of inverts your commands and stuff. You can have things wrap, and we're not going to do anything like that. We're just going to go to justify content, and we're going to center it. And so we want our stuff centered around just the center of the footer. Justify content center. Okay, great. All right, that seems to be over kind of far to the right. I wonder if this UL is kind of poking in a little bit, but anyway. All right, so then now what we're going to do is we're going to add some margin to kind of space out the icons a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll go margin left, and then I'll go 15 pixels. Okay, and that kind of creates some space there. But then really quick, I want to inspect this because that looks kind of funny to me. Yep, okay. So we can see here this unordered list. As I hover over it, you can see there's this green box right here. And so blue is content, green is padding, and then orange is margin. And so we can see that there's some padding on the left. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the padding left on here to 0. Okay, so that gets rid of the padding, and now we can see that the icons are now back in the center. Okay. All right, and even again, they might be a little bit off right now too, because by applying a 15 margin to the left, this left icon is probably not moving, and then these other two are moving away from the left icon. And so what we can do is on the unordered list, we can add a margin left of -15 pixels. And then what that does is that shifts the whole that shifts the entire container over 15 pixels. And so because these two numbers match up, then that makes it so these can be totally centered. So yeah, so now they're totally centered, and they'll respond to changing width, and as the width and everything changes, they still stay in the center, and that can be surprisingly difficult to achieve using older methods. So yeah, so this Flexbox thing is your friend, and then just remember the left column are properties for the container, the parent, and then these are the properties for the children. So the stuff on the left would be for the unordered list, the stuff on the right is for the list items. So, or with nested divs or whatever it is, they don't have to be an unordered list, it's just this is for the container, this is for whatever's inside the container. So you could have like images, flowing down a page. You could have, yeah, all sorts of stuff. If you had like Instagram or Pinterest, if you think of like I guess like Pinterest, like all the different like boxes and stuff going up and down the page. I guess they call it like a masonry background, I think, or a masonry layout, I think is what that's called. But anyway, that's really easy to achieve with Flexbox. So, all right, so we've covered, hovering. We've covered some like spacing. We've covered the box model and text and background color, how to change the color, how to change font. Yeah, some stuff like that, or like font size. Oh yeah, changing actual fonts. We'll go into that another time. So right now, what we'll do is I'm going to go create some files, and then I'm going to open them up in the browser just so you can see how to do that. So I'm going to go over to the terminal, and then I'm going to jump into Lambda, jump into Mini Bootcamp, and then lecture. I'm going to remove it so I can just clear everything out, and then make directory lecture, jump in here. So now I just have a bunch of, now I just have an empty space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go touch index.html. So that creates the index.html file. And then touch styles.css. Okay, great. So then now what I can do is I'm going to open up this folder in Sublime. Okay. So now here in index.html, I'm going to add in a head tag. Real quick, with the, you've probably seen this thing floating around. Let's see, is that right? I usually have to look it up. Oh yeah, exclamation mark is in front of it. Okay. Oh wait, no, I did do that. Okay, I think that's right. You hardly ever type it, and so I have to look it up and make sure I got it exactly right. Okay, so what this right here, this doctype HTML, that tells the browser that we're using HTML5. And anyway, it's important to say that because there's a lot of different browsers and they'll all interpret your HTML slightly differently. And so they call it quirks mode. And so what it is if you don't have this in there, then the browser will, different browsers will treat your elements differently, and they'll behave like different styles and elements will behave slightly differently in different browsers, and it can be a big source of headaches. And I don't remember any specific differences right now, but anyway, you stick this in there, and then it makes it so your browsers will treat your code a little more uniformly, and there's still differences in there, but this at least lets them know that you are using HTML5 instead of an earlier version of HTML. All right, so here in the head tag, let's go link rel style sheet href styles.css. All right, let me close it up like that. I even have to look these up sometimes just to make sure I'm doing it right. Okay, type, I'm just gonna make sure I get the type in there too, and then these ones don't technically self-close, so, all right, type is text/CSS, I think that's what it was. I'm jumping into some other code bases and stuff for other stuff I'm working on that I have open. So, oh, there we go. Okay, so, all right. So now this should be linked in, but now let's add something to the page. So let's add a body, and then, all right, so div, I'm going to call this div the navbar. Okay, and then now I'm going to move over to styles. I'm going to go navbar. I'm going to give it a height of 50 pixels and a background of red. Okay, so then I can jump in and make sure that stuff is rendering properly. So, okay, so now what we can do is I can right-click on index.html. I can go to Open in Browser. Just by default, So like even if I just like open this up in like Finder, index.html, it will just by HTML files by default will just open up inside of a browser. And so you can see here with this URL, instead of saying like www. Gmail.com or whatever, instead of specifying a domain, it's actually saying like file : // and so it's saying like look on the local computer and then render it. And so the browser is actually looking on my computer for this file and then it's rendering it. And so you can build out this application and have it running right here locally. And so it's just, anyway, so if you're doing HTML and CSS, you can actually just whip it up in your browser, just pull it right up in your browser, and you don't need to do anything fancy to be able to view it. Just, yeah, you can just specify the local file path like this. So I mean, it would be kind of a pain to like write out this path, but just open up the file and then it should give you the option to open it in your browser. Okay, I had a question pop up. Why do you add / to things without content? Let's see, / to things without content. I'm sorry, not where exactly am I using that without content? Let me think. Oh, do you mean like with like on the HTML elements? Like, do you mean like this / Is that what you're referring to? Or maybe if you could type an example, that would help. So anyway, when you get caught up to this point of the lecture, type me an example in there, and then I'll get back to it. Okay, I'm gonna jump back into Chrome. All right, so here's my nav bar. Okay, so now I'm going to cover, well, okay. I'm going to add another div. I'm going to call this main content. All right, so main content, that's just going to be the block where I would stick all of my like main content for the page. So, okay, so I just have this pop up. Oh, like link. Okay, so the /. So there's some elements that are self-closing, and so a link tag, you actually don't need the / in it. It is self-closing, but you don't put that / in there. What a self-closing tag is it's a tag that doesn't need to have like another pair that closes it. So like with body, we have body, and then we have the closing body like this, and then we have div like that. So with like an inputs, you actually don't they don't need a second one, and so they close themselves, and so this is called self-closing. And so I just had forgot that CSS or for link tags you don't put a self-closing mark on there. But yeah, like with input, and there might be a few other elements that self-close like this. Most elements you have to have another closing tag. So self-closing. Yeah, let me know if you want any more clarification on that, or if I just kind of confused you. Yeah, just let me know. All right, so you have main content. I'm going to give that a height of 500 pixels. And then let's give it a background of blue. And I'm going to jump over to Chrome. Okay. All right, so now what I'm going to do is, often what you'll see on pages is you'll have a nav bar that's 100% of the width. Well, actually, you see there's this little white border around the edge, and that's something that Chrome is doing by default. But anyway, there's ways you can get rid of that. But anyway, so yeah, I'm not going to go into that now. Okay, so with blue, I'm going to make it so I want the blue to take up like 60% of the page, but I don't want it to be, yeah, because I don't want it to be 100%. I kind of want it to have like a center column that's kind of, kind of coming like, that kind of like comes into here and then comes into here. But then I still want the header to go 100% of the way across. So kind of like I'm making a giant T. So with this content block, it's hard because if I use pixels and I specify like a very specific pixel width, the problem is as soon as somebody's browser is slightly off, then my layout's going to be totally off. It's going to be totally skewampus if my margins and everything are based off of pixels. And so like if I'm here, it'll look weird, like, maybe it looks fine just like this, but if somebody's browser is slightly more narrow or slightly more wide, it'll be off. If they're on a phone, and it's super narrow like this, then it's all going to be way off. If they're on like more of a tablet view like this, it's going to be off. And so it's called mobile optimization. And this is a big thing where you want to try to design your website to where it naturally reorganizes and scales the different elements on the page. So that way it looks good on a phone, it looks good on a tablet, it looks good on your browser. Because it's something like, it depends on your website, but it's like, I don't know, a significant amount of your traffic is going to come from mobile viewers, and so you need to make sure that you have a good mobile experience. So I actually have one or two things on my to-do list to fix with our site. We have a couple styles that are a little funny on mobile that I need to go in and fix tonight. So anyway, so part of that is you can achieve that with media queries, and a media query is like an if statement that you set for like display dimensions. And so if a display is of a certain width or height, then you have different style sheets that get applied. And so just kind of like an if statement in Python, it's like a CSS if statement. It says if the width is this, then use these styles. If the width is this, then use these other styles. And so anyway, I'm not going to dive into the specifics of that, but that's kind of generally the idea. And we go over that more in our full-time course. We go over more in depth on how to make a really good mobile experience for your websites. So, all right, so background blue, but now we need it to be a more of a dynamic width. And so what we can do is we can go width, and then let's set it to 60%. So what this is going to do is it's going to take up 60% of the page, or 60% of its 60% of its container. And so right now, the body is actually the container that these divs are in. So now the blue is taking up 60% of the body. And I'm just going to inspect this real quick. I think that the body has some padding on it. Oh, it's the HTML tag. Okay, it looks like so it's not HTML. I guess. Yep. So the body has an 8-pixel margin around it. If we look at this again, so let me get that out of here. So if we jump down in here and look at, if I click on the body, you can see that the body has an 8-pixel margin. That's why I have this white stuff going around the end of the page. So I'm going to go in and get rid of that. I'm going to go and set at the top of this body, and then I'm going to go margin 0. And then there. So that gets rid of it. So now we're flush up against the edges of the page, and that's what we want. Okay, so let's jump back into Sublime. All right, so now we're at 60%, but we're hugged over to the side, and we don't want that. And so what we can do now is we can go margin left 20%. And so we have 20% of margin on the left, 60% width, and then that naturally leaves 20% of space on the right. And so we don't need to set a margin on the right or anything. We're just naturally going to have that perfectly aligned box. Come in and refresh, and boom. So I'm going to make the height a little bit higher. I'm going to go, let's go 800. Oh, that's not 800. Okay. Great. All right. So now I can scroll down. Great. Actually, I'll go a little closer, actually, just to keep it closer to a single page. Okay. All right. So now we have something that kind of behaves like a header. We have this like container for our body, and then now let's add in a footer. Okay, so we have these 3 divs that kind of make up the main blocks of our page. You have a nav bar or header, and then we have a like our main content, and then we have our footer. And so now let's go down to footer. Let's set height. We'll set this to I guess let's do the nav bar. Let's make them both 100 pixels. All right, and then we'll set this to background below. Okay. All right. So now we see we have our header up here, we have our main body, and then we have this footer on the bottom. And so, I mean, this is honestly a fairly common layout to web pages. A lot of web pages will actually kind of use a very similar design. So like if we go over to our like LambdaSchool site, you can see that we have this like header across the top. It's translucent. We use an RGBA value there, so we can make it translucent. Then it becomes opaque once we pass a certain point as we're scrolling down. Yeah, we have this giant image that goes across. It's a background of this element, and then we come down here, and okay, and so then as we come down here, we have these more margins on the left and right. Okay, and then we have this this other data and stuff that's going across through here. Anyway, but you can see here that we have these margins and things on the side. Like it's not flush up against, and we kind of mix it up, you know, and you know, the colors alternate. You know, that makes it more appealing. You know, you try to keep things aligned as much as you can. Like here, like so, our button is flush and aligned with the text that goes along here. White backgrounds with or light colored backgrounds with dark text is a lot easier to read than the other way around. And so, you know, like this isn't bad, but generally this is easier to read. And it's really hard to have a colored background that's not white or off-white that doesn't look like really horrible. Like you see so many of these old school sites out there where people are like just learned how to do a little bit of HTML and CSS, and they're like, oh, it's so awesome, I'll make this like, you know, red background or this like some weird, you know, maroon color or something, and it's just hard to read, and it, you know, gives you a headache. And anyway, so just generally try to stick to, you know, to white backgrounds as much as you can. White or off-white, like right here, this is the white smoke-ish background. It might be a little bit off from it, like it might not be exactly white smoke, but anyway, these are pretty common backgrounds. Yeah, create that contrast. Okay, so saw another question pop up. CSS files can get very large. What is the best way to organize the code so that it is easily located later? Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah, I need to do a do not disturb mode. So, yeah. Let's see. Best way to organize the code so that it is easily located later. So it kind of depends on the way that you're structuring your application. So like with React, you'll actually have like CSS modules that you can create that are specific to the actual components that you're creating. If you're doing something with like Angular, you'll often have like you'll keep it specific to the different views and templates. You know, with Python, you would have a CSS you know, page for like, you know, your template and view. It can get, there's a lot of different directions to go with it to approach this problem. I would say that the best way to do it is if you have common styles that you want to be across everything in your application, just like you want every button to look this way, or you want every single, like you want all of your text to be of this font style, you want, you know, like you want colors to be a certain way, you can stick those in kind of a main CSS file, and then you can have other separate specific CSS files for each page. And that's a common way that I see done with like static websites. And what I mean by a static website is that's a site that's just, it's just like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then you know, it's just something simple, and you're not like communicating with a server, you're not using a big complex framework or anything like that. Yeah, so like I've been doing something with like CSS modules. That's something with React, and what that allows you to do is it allows you to kind of package up your CSS and these like specific sheets, and then you can import them and export them, and you can do that with JavaScript, and it kind of creates some like scoping and with your CSS that can be really awesome, because right now CSS is kind of messy and it's kind of slow to catch up. There's a lot of really powerful programming concepts that can be applied to it to make it better. And yeah, another thing to look at too is it's called Sass. And so syntactically awesome style sheets. And this gives you a bunch of different features that you can use with your CSS. And so there's stuff like you can declare variables, and you can do different like computations. You can nest your CSS, which can be pretty cool. You can yeah, import stuff and export it. You can create mix-ins. There's Sass is kind of the standard. More people use that. Less is another one. Sass seems to be used a little bit more. We're going to be teaching Sass in our upcoming course. We'll be teaching Sass and how to create yeah, those responsive designs. Okay, so I'm going to talk about our homework real quick just to make sure that everyone understands it exactly. So where is it? Okay. All right, Python Minicamp Homework 6. Okay, so in here, pretty much what you're going to be doing is you're going to recreate this page. So you're going to come in here and then, yeah, I should add a body and remove this, remove that port. But you're going to come in here and then try to get these to be properly aligned. Try to get everything to match and fit and work out perfectly. So that is the design that you're going to do. So it's a picture that you're going to look at, and then you're going to make your HTML and CSS and have it do all of that. And then so for extra credit, we'll have you play around with some of the pseudo-classes and hovering, and then also and then after that, one of the next best things that you can do to get better at HTML and CSS is to pick a web page that you like and then go through and try to copy it. And so try to reproduce it on your computer, and that helps you get a lot. But you'll get really good really fast with HTML and CSS if you're going through and practicing building stuff. So, all right, okay, yeah. Just real quick, something I wanted to talk about real quick is our upcoming courses. So we have our full-time and part-time classes. Going to be awesome. We're going over all this stuff. We go over data structures and algorithms. We're going to be going over, hash tables and graphs and binary search trees and all that good stuff, linked lists and everything, and different algorithms that are associated with that. We'll be going over responsive design and Sass. Now you know what those mean. We're going to be going over some pretty in-depth and advanced JavaScript as well as ES6, a lot of the newer features. Yeah, along with DevOps, security, and then practical stuff with resume writing, how to apply, get a job, different ways to continue growing afterwards. Yeah, how to use social media and how to negotiate your salary, different things like that. But yeah, we're seats are filling up, and anyway, but we'd love to get as many of you from this class as possible, because we know that you guys have now had some background, and we know that you'd be able to get off to a good head start. Yeah, so if you're interested, we'd love to have you come and apply, and we'll set up an interview and meet with you and talk with you some more, and yeah, see if this is the right fit for you. Okay, so I am Ben Nelson, and this was super fun. So I'll be in Slack answering any questions. The end.